What's up everybody, Coach Mills from Game Leap here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in Valorant, one of the most important things that you should be doing is using your abilities correctly. You see, every single ability can give you tons of impact and value, but if you are misusing it again and again, then that could be the biggest thing holding you back. That being said, in this video, we're going to be going over the top 6 misused abilities in the game so that you have more value and impact, of course, and you're going to be able to climb a lot easier by ironing out these mistakes and thinking about some interesting ways to use these abilities. But GameLeap.com is the best place to master any of these characters with in-depth character guides over every character in the game, plus map, mechanical, pro meta guides, anything you need in order to climb, we got it at the Game Leap website. So do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Now, kicking it off with the first ability in the entire game that we have to talk about, and it's Sage's Heal. And I know what a lot of you are going to be saying. This is a very easy ability to use. You just see someone low and you heal them right up. But there are tons of ways to optimize this ability and an entire change of playstyle that can greatly help you in your ranked games, pulled directly from what the pros are doing. Now, the first thing that pros are doing that you are most likely not doing with Sage's Heal is using it right away, early game, pretty much for almost any sort of damage on the table. Now, the reason that they do this is healing early allows you to have it multiple times over the course of a round, and when you and your team have tons of abilities to stall for default, if you can, take an aggressive engagement, or one of your teammates takes an aggressive engagement, and then you get off a heal early, you'll be able to stall them for enough time before you get into another engagement, and of course you'll get another heal back. So basically, healing early is essentially free. Now, on top of that, another thing that pros do really often is that they use it selfishly way more than you would expect. You see, at the end of the day, right, if a Sage dies herself, she will not be able to heal anyone else, right? That's it. And Sage is very important to stay alive. So regardless of how low other people are, if you taken a substantial amount of damage and you're like in the 60 health territory, more often than not, the Sage will heal herself selfishly. And honestly, in my personal opinion, if you're a Sage, you should really be healing selfishly. But I know for the vast majority of people, they're not gonna like this. They're not gonna like a Sage that just heals for herself, but a Sage that stays alive longer, gets more heals off in the game is gonna be better. And then the last thing that you should be doing to guaranteed value out of Sage's Heal is play off of it. And this is going to be a common trend throughout a lot of these abilities. If you are playing for a retake, or you're playing for a play, or whatever the case may be, let's say you're full health but your ally's low, just wait the 20 seconds out if you can afford it. If they just planted, you have quite a bit of time, or if you know enemies are in a location, you want to make a play on them, you have a little bit of time before you have to go in on attack or whatever. Try to play off your heal. There is very little downside, or the downside is worth it, just waiting out the time, healing up one of you, either yourself or your ally, before you engage, so then you have a much better chance of actually winning the team fight. Otherwise, that person is going to run in at 1 HP, die instantly. You're never going to get that heal off when all you had to do was exchange some time for value. So definitely keep that in mind. Now, the next ability that we got to talk about is Omen's Paranoia, and this one is really important because it's really easy to mess this up. Now, there are 2 common things that you need to think about when using this. The first thing is you can't use this from a super close range because enemies, of course, can see you. This is why it's really difficult for you. If you stun someone in a corner, you should not be cutting the corner close when you're trying to peek that person. You should be backing up and making sure you're pretty far away from the corner or the wall before you swing out onto a blind enemy, or else they'll be able to see you and kill you. So that's the first most important thing. The second most important thing is understanding where Paranoia is strong on the map, and it is really strong in longer sightlines. So let's say you're playing a map like Haven, correct? If you are on defense, it is far better for you to be playing something like A long or C long than playing somewhere in the middle just to set up Paranoia. The reason this is, if enemies are rushing through A long or C long, you could effectively use your ability down the entire sightline and basically blind many people, plus specifically those places, specifically A long. There is no place for them to hide behind if they commit to the middle of A long. You're going to be able to stun multiple enemies enemies and get a multi-kill. And these are the positions that you really want to take. So you want to think about how you can set Paranoia up in a way to where you can stun multiple people and basically take space for an entire sightline. So even if you don't stun enemies, you know that if they were in that entire area, they would have got stunned, so you could take that space for free. That is the most effective way to use Paranoia. So as long as you, one, step out before you use it or before you swing an enemy that you know is blinded, and two, set yourself up in longer sightlines, you're gonna get a lot more value out of this ability. Now moving on to the third ability that we gotta talk about, and this is exactly how pros are using it in their game, so you know it is legitimate. It is Cypher's Cam, and this is how you use it to get the most impact. What good Cyphers are doing, specifically players like Dapper in his games, what he's doing at a pro level is instead of tagging anybody, which he won't do, he will actually just be pinging them. And that's what you really should be doing in your games. If you have a camera set up somewhere on point, you don't want to necessarily be actually targeting someone with the ability to target them, because enemies are going to look up, they're going to shoot it, they're going to know that enemies are coming after them. That's not what you want to do at all. What you want to be doing is you want to be setting a bit of power angle, so you're kind of in a position to potentially enter the fight at a moment's notice. Then you want to be going in your camera and pinging constantly while your team plays for the retake. You can ping as they move, ping, 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 and your teammates know exactly where they are. If the point is smoked out or anything, they're going to be able to kill that person with a constant flow of information. And then you can go on to the next person and the next person. It is a very good way to use your camera. The second thing that you could do with camera that a lot of pros are doing specifically on attack is they're pushing forward and taking space on a certain area. Let's talk about Ascent. They push forward on B and they put a camera in a cubby that checks the B flank, and they keep it there the entire game. And the reason for this is just to prevent enemies from pushing out. It's pretty obvious, but it's one of the most important things that you should be doing on Cypher on attack. If you don't do this, you're gonna get flanked and your entire team's gonna get killed, and they're gonna roast you, and you're gonna go cry to your, your puppy dog or whatever, and he's not gonna understand. So make sure that you actually do this every single time you're playing attack. It is very important to do so. Set up your camera with intent to specifically block these flanks. Even if you have to play in default for a while, take space and put your camera, of course, in an area where enemies are not going to inherently check. Now moving on to the next ability we got to talk about. And this is actually two separate abilities rolled into one: Omen and Brimstone smokes. Now, smokes in general are being misused specifically on defense a lot, so I want to clear up some things that you need to be doing and the differences between Omen and Brim. So first off, what you want to be doing, especially when you're playing one of these smokes on defense, you want to be consistently smoking off the sidelines, especially when you think enemies are trying to push through them. You see, when an enemy is trying to push through a choke point, they're really disincentivized to push through if they have no information. So if you can perma smoke a point where enemies are playing in default, for example, if you keep smoking that choke to where if they step out of the choke, they will immediately be seen, but they have no information on the other side, that is just as good to disincentivize them as almost something like a Sage or a Slow. It is incredibly good at stalling in the same way that any of those other stalling abilities work, because enemies aren't going to push through that smoke because they're going to pop out on the other side, have no idea where enemies are, and all you have to do is look right at that smoke's edge, and if enemies pop out, you kill them just like that. It's really easy. Now, the reason that this is important is because on Brimstone, a lot of players will either try to smoke a whole bunch of different places and they won't focus on the angles that they're trying to smoke. This is also why a smoke player really wants to be holding an area, specifically a Brimstone, wants to be holding the most powerful area that people can push through. Let me give an example. Like specifically, if you're playing Brimstone on Bind on defense, you want to be consistently smoking that middle section, especially when you know enemies are there. That mid, that A mid, is one of the most powerful positions that you could possibly hold. And if you could perpetually smoke there, enemies are not going to be able to push through very easily because they have no idea the information on the other side of that smoke. And if they do, you could set yourself up in U-Haul to make a play on them. Now, the thing about Omen that really changes this entire dynamic is that Omen, unlike Brimstone, can smoke across map. This means that if you're playing on any side on defense, but you know that the enemy is pushing in from the other side of the map, you should be smoking off their entrance. This not only prevents them from helping, so if some people are already committed, the other parts of the team can't help from that power angle of the opening onto point, but if the enemy haven't pushed on yet, they're gonna lose their information or their LOS, and they have to commit to either going onto point or backing off, or they're gonna put themselves in a really bad position. That is why Omen is seeing a lot of pro play, because he can really help people from any side of the map, and that is something that you should be doing. Help people with your smokes no matter what is going on, even if you're not near them if you're playing specifically Omen. Now moving on to the next ability that we got to talk about on the list, and this is a really important one that a lot of people are using wrong, and it's Boombot. Now Boombot is great for a lot of things. It's good at gathering information, it's good at potentially, you know, overloading the enemy and getting a kill, but there are a lot of different ways that people are using it really poorly. The first thing that people are doing is they're throwing it right down a line of enemies. Like, they know enemies are in one direction and they'll throw it in a straight line. The first thing that does is it basically just runs down mid and gets shot, and that's all there is to it. It doesn't do anything, you can't play off of it or whatever. What you would rather your Boombot do is control space for a certain amount of time and punish enemies for pushing in. So you really don't want it to be going in a straight line. You want it to be going back and forth between the walls of the space you want to control or the space you want to be punished when enemies push in. This is why you typically want to throw your Boombot in diagonally so that it bounces off several walls. So if enemies push in, it will still be in that space, and instead of it going all the way to where the enemy is and they just have to shoot it, they literally, if they want to push in, they would have to specifically swing the Boombot, or of course, if they want to make a play or anything like that, they have to swing the Boombot, and it basically controls that space for a lot longer. The second thing that you need to do specifically with Boombot that you can do that's really cool is you could throw a blast pack out. You could even stick a blast pack on the Boombot, and as it swings the corner, you activate your blast pack, making the Boombot bounce so that it will greatly mess up the enemy's crosshair, because they're going to be looking at your Boombot ready to shoot it. It's going to bounce up in the air, and they're going to really freak out trying to flick to it. Sometimes they won't have been able to kill it, and even if they can, you're going to be able to swing right after it. They're going to waste all their ammo and their crosshair placement and their time, and you're going to be able to get a free kill out of that. So definitely try these things, and you're going to get a lot more value out of Boombot rather than just sending it down a really long corridor and it gets killed and does basically nothing after that, because enemies can just rotate right afterwards or whatever. It doesn't really gather any information that leads into anything because it's going way too far for you to make a play on it, and just knowing that an enemy is there is really actually just like the bottom of the barrel of value that you could get out of this ability. Then we're going to the last ability we got to talk about, and it's Reyna's Dismiss. Now, this seems like a really obvious ability to use, right? You grab it right away, you go intangible, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Use it to retreat, whatever. But there are some ways that you can optimize this to get some more value. One thing that a lot of players will do that is really, really good is if they get that first kill in isolation and they're up against some other enemy that they know kind of their general area, they will pop their ult first, then they will grab the orb and make an aggressive play, because then they go completely invisible. They get that increased movement speed plus that heal, and they can potentially set themselves up in a really powerful position where enemies have no idea where they are because they could like wrap around a corner. That is a really good way to use it. Another thing that you can actually do is purposely delay grabbing the orb, and this one takes a really fair bit of timing and patience, but you could do something like kill someone, aim at an enemy, and try to trade blows. The second they fire back, then you dismiss, relocate, and try to kill them. You could even delay it for things like bomb explosions, delay it for things like ultimates, like Raze's rocket launcher. There's a lot of different ways to delay it for value, because you got to remember, it does stay around for a short amount of time, and you don't have to use it immediately. Sometimes, actually, it's better to stand your ground, try to get a kill, and then, of course, if there's multiple orbs on the ground, realize that you can cascade one into the other. So definitely think about these things before you just grab Dismiss every time it drops, because there are ways to optimize it, and there are ways to get a little bit more value and use it more on your terms rather than just grabbing it every single time you can. But of course, if you want to master any of these characters, the GameLeap.com website has in-depth VODs over Sage, Omen, Cypher, Brimstone, Raze, and Reyna, plus more. And if you want to learn in-depth mechanical guides, game sense guides, positioning, map guides, we have everything for you at the Game Leap website. So do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below. But that's all I got for you today. Thanks so much for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time,